Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, why it's Joey Maguire's favorite time of year.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. And I know that we are in a hardcore hoops mode as we hit the final regular season week for Grant McCasland and the Red Raiders. They'll be back in action from United Supermarkets Arena for the home finale against Colorado coming up, and we'll return to that subject on tomorrow's episode. We're going to take just a quick moment on today's episode, however, to talk a lot of Red Raider football. Spring camp is just around the corner, Chris, and on today's episode, we will get to where Texas Tech is being mentioned among their Big 12 colleagues as it relates to projected win totals. We'll take a look at some numbers from FanDuel coming up. I also want to get to some sound from Red Raider head coach Joey Maguire talking about his approach to his spring camp and the spring game. Those things kind of changing for some other programs for various reasons around the country. We'll take a listen to Coach Maguire on that coming up. And I want to kick off our conversation, taking a listen to Coach Maguire, going back to the portal experience that electrified us all. Coach Maguire was spending some time talking with David Smoke, a buddy of yours, Chris, on 365 Sports. I think you guys actually visited prior to this conversation with Coach Maguire for a lay of the land here in the 806. But we'll get to the sound in just a moment. But I know Coach Maguire, as far as the portal whirlwind was concerned, kind of sounds like maybe it felt that way more so to the fan because it kind of hit you like just a sack of bricks. Like, wow, what are we doing? Okay, this is almost out of nowhere. But the more I hear from Coach Maguire or James Blanchard or others that were a part of this effort, not really out of nowhere at all. It was very well choreographed, very well organized. And obviously, probably a lot of that success that they were able to realize was a result of that preparation.
Yeah, and it's weird. I almost feel like we need to apologize for not talking any hoops on this particular episode, but that tells you how good your basketball season has been going lately, and so that's a positive.
Right.
But no, we're gonna stick to the gridiron on this lovely Tuesday. So yeah, I obviously Coach Maguire knows David Smoke from his time in Waco, and yeah, Smoke reached out to me and was like, "Hey man, what should I ask here? What all would the Tech fans want to know and all that?" But yeah, they kind of lengthy conversation ran the gamut. But I think I will say, as it relates to the portal, because that's the audio we're about to hear, I do think, and Joey was, he was well documented as saying, we're gonna 8 to 12, and I do think there was you're prepared for a lot, but I do think there was a point where like, let's keep going. Like
that was kind of out of nowhere, I guess, right?
Yeah, let's keep going. Like
roll on. Yeah.
Look at what else is still out here. And then you had, I knew specifically you had another donor that was like, "Hey man, I'm good for some more here," and so it's like, okay, and then you're like, because I think Joey's comment to me that I think sums this up is that the production in the portal at the time was just something they couldn't ignore. If they trust their evaluations and trust, because look at what Grant and them have done right now and how they chose. That's the game right now. How well do you choose? Everybody's got some money. Everybody's going to be able to get a guy or three. Which guy or three do you get versus which guy or three does the other guy get? You think you chose better than Bill Self did on the basketball standpoint? It appears so. I'm not saying all the dollar figures are equal and all this stuff. But if you trust your process and your ability to rank and figure out your needs and your character, because that's the biggest thing. How well vetted were you able to look through these guys? Hey, man, I don't want to bring that dude in. He's going to screw up my locker room. I don't care how good or talented he is. I mean, there's all those things you've got to weigh financially, position fit.
Chris, let me ask you this. Where do you think because I'm thinking about McCaslin's hit rate. It's like 99%. I'm trying to maybe a Cambridge defection turned out to not be a hit, but he's choosing them pretty good as far as those who are fitting in and making a big impact. Coach McGuire has a much bigger roster to assemble.
So
where do you think his kind of hit rate has been so far? I think he's hit on more than not.
I agree.
I'm wondering, how do you see his success rate in choosing the right fit, and not just him, obviously his staff as well.
I think for the most part you have to be. Now, granted, they would say to you, well, regardless of what you guys are going to grade us on, we haven't hit enough because we're not, we haven't played in the league title game, and ultimately it's all that matters. How did we get from here to here? And so much of the roster portal recruiting aspect has to help us get here. We haven't, but yeah, you haven't just had too many. Like Maurice Rodriguez was a miss. That may have been supply and demand and timing, and I think they tried to learn from some of that. And Maurice Rodriguez is probably like, people hear that name and go, who's he talking about? Exactly. Yeah. And this is a big reason why your offensive line was still kind of, but that's been the issue for a couple of years, is that O-line. And I think by all accounts, you're going to lean on Howard Sampson, Vinny Scurry, Hunter Zambrano, and Will Jadis. And you will have brought them all in from the outside, and then maybe add Sheridan Wilson to the mix, and that could, in theory, be your, and Davion Carter could factor into that. It's somewhere, but those are 4 of 5 or 5 of 6 guys that you've brought in here. One of which I think was a hit, but we barely saw him, and then Scurry gets hurt, and that affects the rest of it. But I would say for the most part, yeah, it's been pretty good.
Maybe like a C plus B minus 75, 85% kind of range. Pretty dang good. Grant McCaslin's kind of spoiled us with how far he's taken it. And the roster building is totally different. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yes.
Both have been pretty good overall. It's kind of strange too to compare and contrast what you're asking of these guys that come in. Say if you're asking a guy to come in and, hey, will you go ahead and man the left tackle position day one for us? Versus trying to fit in elsewhere. So a lot of context we've got to include there, but just curious for your thought on the hit rate so far. And
I'll tell you this. I hope they were they were 100% A plus with this last group.
I was going to say that an increasing talent level probably is also increasing your margin for hitting or missing.
I completely agree. And because when your job becomes, I've got the measurable, I've got the talent, I just have to get the buy-in. Now we have to get them to play with and for each other. And if that's the biggest problem, that's where Joey excels. But I think previously you're maybe getting guys that aren't as talented and don't fit the part, or you're asking them to do more than maybe what they're capable of. But I think, again, all of these previous portal windows and classes, it's all been a learning experience. And it led us to December of 2024. That's what it led us to.
That's right. Making my hair stand up just thinking about it. Let's take a listen to Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire on 365 Sports, talking about this portal effort and also talking about some of the motivations as to why they went the directions that they did within it. First, today's episode brought to you by SupplyHouse. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades with SupplyHouse. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, SupplyHouse is the reliable way to order products online. And their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from more than 400 top brands, you're going to find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? SupplyHouse offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn to take your business to the next level. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM. That's supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with only a few clicks. Plus, use our promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's SH5 at supplyhouse.com. Let's take a listen to Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire on 365 Sports talking about this portal effort and also talking about some of the motivations as to why they went the directions that they did within it, and also the balance of wanting to, of course, maintain what went well for you and is already on your roster versus trying to attract some of that new impact. Here's Coach McGuire.
It's really a balance of both. We wanted to make sure that we didn't lose anybody on our roster that we felt were in our too deep. They could contribute. And then we knew that we had to make some, when I say this, upgrades, we needed some age and some really good players in the offensive line, defensive line, and the secondary. I mean, that's what we really attacked in the portal. Just from the standpoint where we lost some vets in the O-line, and then, we have some really good young offensive linemen that will be in the too deep. But we knew we had to get older there. And then on defense, that was I feel like that's the reason we weren't in the Big 12 championship. We just didn't play good enough defense, and we didn't get to the quarterback enough. And then we were one of the worst teams in the country whenever it came to pass defense. So have a new coordinator and then have some really good players on that side of the ball to get ready for spring ball.
A couple of the specifics that stood out to me, Chris, thought it was interesting. He emphasized the age aspect and then just went right back to it again and said, defense is the priority. Defense is what kept us away from where we wanted to be. What'd you make of that?
Well, the year before, when we started doing this show a couple of years ago, you were on the cusp of a football season where you were going to be pretty old on that side of the ball. You had all those some Matt Wells staff holdovers. You added you brought in some portal guys yourself, and it was just an older group with a lot of starts under their belt. And I think last year this was more of a, okay, we're losing a lot, but we've recruited well. We're going to try to sprinkle a few James Hansons and guys like that into the mix. DB Carroll, and try to, and I think that they look back on it and go, man, we just we were leaning way too much on unproven and youth and inexperience, and it just didn't work. There was almost not. It's like they went from one extreme to the other, really, and there wasn't. I think right now you're trying to live in the let's find a happy medium here, and here's the tricky part about living the happy medium life. You have to have enough buy-in and enough trust in this younger group to go, hey, dude, we get it. We're with you. We want to be developed. We want to stay here, and all those things. And I do think that for the most part, you saw, because I was a little curious if some of these defensive guys would be like, hey, man, I'm out. I see what you're bringing in here. There's not a spot for me. And you really didn't lose anybody, okay? There was some, but not anybody that I go, ooh, that one stings. And that's the fun part about your culture and all those things, because they see what is coming in here. You have Mo Horn, and then you have 4 other guys that could potentially start at corner for you. Well, what's Macho Stevenson thinking? Now, he struggled at times last year, but what's Ashton Hampton thinking? Going, okay, so when and where am I supposed to play? You see what I mean? So like there's a level of, you got to find a mix, and that's the tricky part for a coaching staff. But you have to, at some level, you have to be older, and that's why the production stat that we got into, I think it was on a show last week, because so many of these guys have played so many games that you brought in, there just has to be a level of that to win and win big these days. Because if you're not, you can go with the whole, we're going to be young and develop and do it organically and all that. We're not going to do the whole portal thing. Well, everybody else is. And I think that at some point, age and experience, it just can only, you're hampered if you don't have enough of it. And I'm not saying you have to be all in on one or the other, but again, we need to live that happy medium life here. And I think that they found a nice balance. That's why I was so excited about so many of the guys you brought in that have multiple years to play, because you're living the happy medium life there. If everybody you bring in is a one and done, you can't spin this wheel every year and land on the old or you're going to land on bankrupt, I guess. Is that a Wheel of Fortune reference? I don't know where I was going with the wheel there.
I think there's a little Monopoly layer. There's some Wheel of Fortune layer.
Yeah.
But it all makes sense. And I think there's no substitute for experience, and there's no substitute for how you get experience. It's time spent doing it, and doing it hopefully your way, whatever program that's related to. But I'm sure it's very, very difficult to try and strike that balance. I don't know, certainly as you get into this new revenue sharing era, it's going to be very interesting to see what type of maybe unintended consequences or impact that we're not imagining right now is going to be out there. But we know that for this most recent and maybe de facto final kind of round, as it were, Texas Tech went all out and found a lot of success within the context of pursuing those players they wanted. Now, will they find success in getting those players to fit in and actually make a team that competes for something serious? Only time's going to tell. I do think as a long time Red Raider observer, it's very interesting, Chris, and you've been around long enough to probably feel this way as well. It's very interesting to see kind of a trend bucked, or at least a historical narrative bucked, in saying, no, we're going to pursue top shelf defensive talent in order to be a top shelf defense in order to create a championship contending team. I go back to my very early days, Spike Dykes days, when there was still some defense going on, but it always felt like you have a low ceiling from a personnel standpoint, recruiting wise. So how far can you really go? Then you get into the Mike Leach area, you get into everything that followed after that. And it was like, yeah, we'll get around to the defense if we think about it. But, it's just kind of the way it is. We must invest in the offense because that's our best way to get close enough to have a shot, given the personnel that we, i.e. Texas Tech, historically recruits. And that's all fine and dandy and made for some very, very entertaining football seasons, no doubt. But I think most people that were fans of football historically understood, like, how far can you get if you're not actually playing defense? Joey Maguire bringing this thought about is not news to anybody around here, but it is something a little new in that I'm wondering, all right, yeah, you do need to play it. Do you think you actually can? Do you think you actually can go get the personnel to do that on that side and then contend for some hardware? And man, I can't wait to find out. I'm glad he believes that he can, Chris. And as far as the personnel goes, well, look what he's done so far. So I think, does that make sense historically? You fit into these offensive and defensive narratives, and here's Joey Maguire, kind of trying to shake that up in a way we at least haven't seen in a while, or maybe like, in the history of the program from a talent perspective.
Well, this is why after some of those games last year, everybody's trying to fire this guy or has an issue with this play call, and not the head coach. You averaged, 35, 6 points a game, whatever it was. But the head coach is a defensive-minded guy at heart. And I think there's some statistics and data that bring this up. It's like you can't get to, the teams that have won the Big 12 championship, that they've got to have this level of defense as far as total defense or whatever. You get ultimately to win big, you have to be like top 30 in both categories. That's really what it's supposed to look like. And offensively last year, you were top 10 by any which way you want to look at it. Points scored, yards, whatever. And defensively, you were in the 120s. So a change, he felt
90 off from that top 30.
Yeah, it's math.
It's just good to know where we stand.
A change needed to be made in his mind. And then I think that not only do they make a change, it's let's throw some resources at it. Let's go get an up-and-comer defensive coordinator that was crushing it at Houston last year. Let's pay him every penny that we think he's worth, or Houston could even come close to matching it. And then let's go give him a bunch of new toys. Let's give him 4 new defensive linemen. Let's give him 5 new DBs. Let's maybe not even be done there with what we give him from a outsider perspective. And then, oh, by the way, yes, you graduated the Luxes and the Baskervilles and the Hansons and I'm trying to think of, the mix of guys that you graduated. But look at what we're going to give you. And again, you may continue to add to that, but then we're going to keep all of your young nucleus here. It's a fun spot if you're Shield Wood right now, because one, to your entire point, the bar is relatively low as far as expectations go. But you're never going to get to Arlington or to playoffs or whatever if you can't have your defense come along for the party and the ride and help you win games when your offense may not be able to on some days because of weather or because of whatever. That's what Joey would tell you. There's too many things that variables that can change on offense. A stupid turnover, the weather, the surface, whatever. Defense can control a lot more on their side of it than offense can, and so that's why that's just what he was. That's his belief.
You can apply that analogy to any
bingo.
Sport. Shots
exactly.
Defense travels. You can rely on
said.
Consistently,
and that's why I love being in the Lee Hunter business, the Romello Height business, the Cole Wisniewski business. I mean, give me all of them, man, and just turn them loose. And then all those young guys over there that look so pretty when they can grow up and all that, and they need to fill in if somebody gets dinged up or whatever. It's the best of both worlds. Happy medium life is potentially being lived right now, and we'll see what it equals.
Yes, I love the off season. Sorry, got a little out of control there. We do have to actually play these games at one point in time, and they're going to keep score. Will we love that as much? We'll find out down the road. Down the road, not too far from now, spring camp set to open up, and Coach McGuire also spoke on his approach to this time of year, which is changing, I guess, for some other programs based on a variety of motivations. Tampering, portal interests, exposing young talent to tampering minds from afar via a television broadcast or things like that. So he touches on his thoughts within those areas, but also gets into something as well from a football standpoint that was kind of scratching me where I was itching, and maybe a throwback also. Physicality, anyone, as part of a spring camp. Could it be so? Here's Red Raider head coach Joey Maguire.
I love spring football. I think it's the purest form of football. You're not getting ready for anybody. You're teaching your fundamentals. I think it's also far enough away to where you can be really physical. I think there's a reason that you're seeing more and more and more NFL players get hurt early in the season is because they haven't had the contact that they used to have, and so I don't want to shy away from that. We're going to have a spring game. The difference, where everybody's going, well, the tampering and we're not going to have a spring game. We're going to have a spring game. We're just not going to televise it, and they can come to Lubbock, Texas. I know, all the fans here in Lubbock will be at the spring game, and we're going to have a spring game. We'll draft it like we did last year. Our guys loved it. And one reason we're doing that is we don't have that's going to be our third scrimmage. And so that'll still be a live tackling besides the quarterback. Because the one weekend we do our football clinic, we practice that weekend. I don't want a bunch of high school coaches to come out here and watch us scrimmage. I want them to see us practice. And so that takes away one of our Saturdays. So we'll use the Saturday, this spring game, and we'll tee it up and get after each other. And I think it'll be a good event, but we just won't televise it. So that takes away from everybody seeing some of our young guys that maybe an agent would be shopping around, because that's where the tampering's coming from, is guys that have agents.
So I was interested to hear him talk about the physicality, and not only that in and of itself, but how it relates maybe to some injuries as the year begins. And then, of course, the thing that is kind of being discussed across the nation, the tampering aspect or the roster aspect to these really visible spring games seems to have had an impact even on somebody like Coach McGuire, who seems not so worried about it, but also mentions a television broadcast not being a part of it, which is a change from sort of some recent history, I guess.
Oh, the old dark underbelly of college football. Agents shopping players and portaling and watching spring games on TV going, okay. I mean, just, yeah, what a mess, man. I think there's just some level of I don't know how much more traditional spring football is going to be in place. I just don't. I think that is got a shelf life that's not going to last too much longer. I just think and Joey sounds like he's a fan of it. I just think that they're going to do some different things, and he may be in the minority, but I just think that the consensus will be we're going to tweak this more to an NFL OTA model, which is maybe more slants toward the summer, and I'm not real sure what all it will look like, but I think it's coming. However, there's just some level of you got to be physical in this deal. We want to be a physical football team, and we can't just talk about it. You've got to be smart. You don't need to do the Oklahoma drill every day and all the stuff, right, that we all grew up with. You have to, pick your spots and all those things. But that's where what Joey's saying is like we can be physical as long as we're smart about it, and it's still far enough out from the regular season that we can, get guys healed up and all that. But having said that, there's certain guys like when they do have their spring game, there will be certain guys that go, "Hey, man, you sit over here." Like you don't like the Taj Brookses of the world last year. So, but he was still pretty physical, even though he didn't go through a spring game, right? And so, that's just how Joey's mindset is. I mean, it's more of this is a new school mindset with his skill set with an old school approach, in that defense, physicality, all the stuff, but then new school way of doing things with the culture and trying to adapt and thrive with all that gets thrown at you with the rules and rev share and all those things. So that's why Joey's such a good fit for college football in 2025, and I'm certainly glad he's here.
How would you, just before we move on, how would you kind of compare his camps from a physicality standpoint? Is it?
Yeah, they hit. Yeah, they hit. They just. Again, I think that there's a fine line in being like, okay, we're going to be crazy about it, like Junction Boys type stuff. No water. Everybody take the water and put it across the street. Nobody gets any. Versus, a giant pillow fight out there. Okay, so there's a
jail in 2025.
there's a happy medium here. Okay,
and that makes sense.
I think they get guys in the mix, but it's like they're not doing it daily and for 3 hours at a time. It's just, but when it's time to go, it's time to go. Okay. Yeah. And if you're an older guy with a lot of tread on your tires, we may be, like, hey, let's shift down a little bit. Let's
not everybody's the same. You got to know that.
Yep. Bingo.
Jimmy Johnson knew that. I remember him always hammering that.
Michael Irvin could sleep all he wanted in a team meeting. Curvin Richards, on the other hand, he got caught sleeping right before the end of the regular season. Curvin was an ex-Cowboy by the end of the day. Hey,
that's right.
Well, Michael Irvin did it. He's Michael Irvin. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like,
you got to know. Are you in a playmaker category or a Curvin category?
Yeah. You can go to the White House, not the one in D.C., but the other White House, and do whatever you want. But you catch me enough touchdowns, and we'll figure it out and sleep it off in the team meeting as long as you show up on a Sunday. But Curvin, I know you were here on time. You're just not as good. And so,
reality.
Yeah.
That's
Gotta go.
We all need reality checks at various points.
And people won't know any of what we just talked about.
Some will. The right ones will.
Google it. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Maybe not on your work network, though. Chris, before we get out of here, one more little piece to amp up the football fever. We're starting to see some of this rolling out. We saw it recently from our friends at FanDuel, some Big 12 win totals, and Texas Tech keeping some good company. Arizona State, Kansas State, and Texas Tech actually all listed at the top three ways. 8.5 wins, the highest number in the league. Baylor, BYU, Iowa State, Kansas, Utah, all at 7.5 to follow. You got Cincinnati, Colorado, Texas Christian, Central Florida, all at 6.5 to follow after that. And after that, well, who cares? What did you make of Texas Tech along there with the Purple Wildcats and the Sun Devils, keeping some of that company at the top of the league?
You know what I would really love one of these odds makers to do is to give me a win total on just conference record. Give me an over-under on just the conference games. That's what is most intriguing to me.
That's a good point, because the non-conference can run so wide as far as the disparity between schedules.
1,000%. And I think it's because, let's just call it what it is. Texas Tech's non-conference schedule this year is non-existent. I mean, if you don't go 3-0,
that's a Beavers shot. It sounds like
1,000%. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but yeah,
in March
in Lubbock too. But yeah, I mean, you got to win those first three. That's kind of a, and I don't want to. I will enjoy those games. There will be things that we glean from those games and things that you need to see and improve upon and all the stuff. But there's really not anything there that you look at and go, okay, if you can get this one, it's not like the Washington State game last year, right?
Yeah, or Oregon.
So with that being said, what you're telling me is 8.5 was the deal, right? And so you're telling me that the over/under on Texas Tech's Big 12 conference record is 5.5.
Sounds like
that's what I am hearing, and you would have gone over that last year.
You're not wanting to be in that neighborhood this year, I don't think.
And that's where the trouble lies. That's the tricky part. It's hard. It's hard. Vegas is telling you that it's going to be a bit tricky. Let me just say this. I really don't give a damn what your win total is. I don't really care if it's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Get me to Arlington. You get me to Arlington. I don't care what it took. And if it was, oh man, 8 wins did it, or 10 wins did it, whatever, because there was 11 win teams that didn't get to Arlington last year. Okay, there was. Get me to Arlington. However, whatever that looks like. Screw your win total, Vegas, or whatever. Get me to Arlington. That's ultimately how this thing will be. And again, what's crazy is the 3-0 non-conference start maybe matters in the playoff scheme or with our psyche or our mood. Doesn't really matter at all as it relates to getting to Arlington.
All right, I'm tracking with you because when you started off with I don't care about the win total, I was thinking, wait, I guess I've got to re-examine this whole thing if we don't care about that. But okay, I'm tracking with you.
But now. You know what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I will endorse that opinion. All right, Chris, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoyed it. Thanks for the insights and the perspectives as well. We'll reconvene for another one on the other side, and we'll be back to getting ready for Big 12 hoops. First and final 2 ball games of this regular season coming up. We'll set the table for the Colorado Buffaloes next time around.
That's right, man. And if you don't get to Arlington, we'll wad up the papers and try again next year. But we will not quit trying. And the next time that we talk to you, you will wake up, and it's your last opportunity to see the Red Raiders play in the USA. How quickly it goes by, but it is here. And you're on the cusp of the finale of the home schedule. And then the tests start to get really fun and meaningful. Mm-hmm. Tempe, KC, a city yet to be determined, probably Denver, maybe Wichita. So away we go. Away we go.
It's knocking on the door. We're ready. We're ready. I already called it. We're ready for March. I said it, so it's got to be that way. We're speaking it into existence. All right. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, everybody, for being out there. Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Special thank you to the Everydayers for always riding along, and shout out to the Matador Mob. If you're interested in becoming a Matador Mobster, hit the show notes. Find a link to a free 14-day trial. That's your direct line to Chris and myself with one-on-one text sent straight to your phone. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for the time. And as always, we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.